Hi, and welcome to BRAIDAR, the business of beauty. My name is Jaden Paru, and I'm a fourth year doing English and management. So, basically, this show is going to be about exploring different things that have to do with beauty brand strategies, different pop cultural influences on modern beauty trends or like fashion trends as well as looking at specifically Gen Z's relationship to beauty and how sort of multifaceted it can be, the sort of rise of aesthetics and different cores, and whether that really fosters a sense of self expression or does it actually hinder that by making it a sort of uniform, almost like one size fits all package for something that's supposed to be very unique. So all those topics are really interesting, and I think there's no like hard and fast answer to them. So yeah, welcome to this journey of exploring the world of beauty and business. So to get right into it today, we are going to be talking about braids and specifically the impact of braids in terms of black cultural iconography and the significance in black culture as well. So especially because it's Black History Month this month. I think it would be really good to start with this topic, and it's something that's really dear to my heart. In fact, the whole name Braidar came out of this sort of need to have a way to access, like, getting braids while at St. Andrews or anywhere that's not your home. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to talk a bit about that and why I think it's such an important thing. So, as we know, this month is all about sort of celebrating Black culture, achievements, and also current community leaders, and just championing the stories and the experiences that make, I don't know, just make it so exciting and so nuanced and so at times challenging, but really just fulfilling to be a Black person in the year 2023, and just all of those things mixed together, just celebrating how far we've come and the how far we have to go basically. So I think that one thing about braids is that they're not just a hairstyle in terms of like, oh, I'll do a ponytail today and then tomorrow I'll like have it all down, then the next day I'll do like half up, half down. Braids are more sort of, they kind of run deeper than that. It's more about the history that you're connecting with by getting this style done, and more about the sort of things that you're signifying through the style. So if you think about it, going back into the sort of historical significance of braids, braids have often been used to communicate certain things about the wearers. Either it's the person's social status or the wearer's affinity in a community, or even just for self-expression through the designs that you choose or the colors that you use for the extensions. It's always been linked to deeper meaning. It's always been linked to a sense of self, and also within that, like self within a community unit. So sort of almost like inbuilt to the process of getting braids and the experience of wearing braids is that link to something more than yourself. And I think that that carries on today, even if, even if people won't say, oh, she has red braids, that means this specifically for this person. It's still connected to a sense of telling a story of who you are and where you've come from and your experiences through that particular medium. And as well as also the braider themselves, they can also express their sort of expertise and their flair and their uniqueness through how they install the style on you and the techniques they use as well. So I think it's just this really, really interesting, dynamic, like multi-way conversation almost, in the form of like styling hair and that artistic side to it. So as well as the patterns telling a story of like the wearer and the braider, and also the fact that like wearing braids can signify belonging in that very um, explicit or literal way of like different symbols within a people group. At the same time, wearing braids in, especially in places that's not your, let's say your home city or your hometown, for example, or places where you're within a minoritized group, wearing braids also takes on another sort of aspect of signifying power, in that when you see someone else who has braids in this place where you're minoritized, it's almost like that. It's a signifier of, oh, you're like, in you, I can see some of my experience reflected. Like you're here in this place where you're not sort of in the majority, but you're still able to connect with your roots and like tap into that sense of self-expression while you're here. So it's almost like in that second that you see someone with braids in these settings, those are the kind of thoughts that sort of spring to mind. And it's almost like that unspoken code almost of like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm kind of recalibrating how I'm thinking about this place in terms of you can get access to these things. You do have access to braiding facilities here. So it's starting that thought process of, oh, it's not as sort of, it's not as removed from what I'm used to as I thought. And then by extension, it's not as sort of, what I'm trying to say is, by extension, you think, oh, it's a more welcoming place for me. Like it's somewhere where I can belong, even if you don't feel like you belong at that moment that you see the person. But it just starts like that change of thought patterns in your mind when you see someone else wearing braids. So specifically to in the context of universities, and especially like predominantly white institutions, I think that this signifying power of braids is a very powerful tool that people often use to gauge that sense of, okay, like how diverse is it here? How accommodating is it here? How free and how able are you to tap into that really important like cultural sort of element and beauty ritual. So, for example, a lot of, if you look on like the forums online for students who are in the last year of high school looking for universities, if you specifically go to a thread concerning like black women, for example, or just black students in general, a lot of the questions may be around, oh, are there braiders in town? Are there African hair shops in town? Are there like barbers in town? Those questions are sort of pertinent enough to be asked in the context of like weighing up one institution against another, because of that fact of, if they have these this infrastructure, then what it's actually telling me is that the population of people who are like me, essentially, is significant enough in number for that to be there, for that infrastructure to be there. If you understand what I'm saying, so it actually ends up being a very useful tool for evaluating or like forecasting, if you will, although it's not a perfect tool, obviously, but for forecasting that sort of future experience you might have in a particular place, especially, as I said again, if it's a PWI that you're like really interested in and considering applying to. So on the flip side of that, the absence of that infrastructure for getting braids, or like things and like shops or individuals rather that can work with your hair, the absence of that is a signifier of, maybe not a direct signifier, but maybe rather a suggestion of there not being, people who who want to, like, the absence of that suggests that the amount of people who would, like, share that experience with you in that community are not, like, there's not that many of them. If you understand what I'm saying, in terms of, it makes you think, oh, maybe it's such a small, like, minority that these things are not in place there. And so if I then put myself into that environment, how would I fare? I would kind of, it's just one less layer of feeling like you can be at home somewhere and feeling accommodated. That is, it's actually very significant when you're trying to picture yourself, like, day-to-day life, and how you'd sort of, I don't know, just maintain the beauty rituals and the things that you do to make yourself feel like yourself in essence. So yeah, it's a really significant thing. And I think that especially as more and more institutions, not just like universities, but even other institutions that recruit individuals and want to champion inclusion and diversity and equality, I think that these considerations are really important, because if someone is recruited or marketed to join an institution that aims to be diverse or feels it is diverse, but then the infrastructure for facilitating that diversity that you want to foster is not there, then what ends up happening is that people feel like they've been thrown in the deep end when they arrive. And so it's just like that, there's a disconnect between the expectation and the reality, and that can be quite demoralizing for students, especially if you're coming from quite far away, you're an international student, for example. It adds to that feeling of isolation, I think, and just feeling like you're not being welcome, in a sense. Yeah, you're just kind of left alone to figure it out and sink or swim. So I suppose now would be a nice point at which to consider the question, what do we do from here? Like, how can we actually improve the status quo in terms of trying to minimize that feeling of a disconnect between the expectations created by very, justified and celebrated moves towards making institutions more diverse, and the reality of being a minoritized individual in such institutions? Well, one way in which I've kind of been thinking about how this can be tackled is through really tapping into the student population and the existing population that may be from that specific cultural background or ethnic group. For example, in the context of braids, I've really been thinking that, okay, maybe it's not as feasible to somehow convince someone to set up a brick and mortar African hair salon in town. That would be a bit more involved, and it's a bit less likely, especially if you're not the braider yourself, like moving to town, if it's someone trying to convince you to move, But maybe the avenue of tapping into the student population that's already within the town, within the university, or within like the local area, like a particular radius, because that could be a really efficient way of sort of bridging that gap and meeting that need that a lot of the student population has in terms of people who want to get braids done. Because one thing that you'll find quite interesting on pages like St. Festru's or even on the main University of St. Andrews groups on Facebook is that there are a lot of black students asking, anyone know any braiders? Anyone know anyone who does like wig installs or different things like that? And then it's almost like there's a hidden contingent of very talented students who can actually do these services, but it's almost like the process now is very convoluted, it's not that easy, and and the onus is kind of on the um, the student seeking out the service to kind of do that digging. But then on the other side, you've got these really talented, really creative students who are doing braids like as a side hustle, or doing wig installs, or even like other beauty side hustles like nails, lashes, brows, makeup, that kind of thing. And then they're really pouring a lot into marketing themselves on Instagram and trying to get the word out and things like that. But as we all know, the Instagram algorithm is not the friendliest. It's not the most altruistic of things. So it's not that easy for both parties to connect and both parties to meet each other's needs, if you understand what I'm saying. So I thought that it would be really nice if there was a centralized place where students who are offering these like beauty services and have those beauty side hustles can meet students who need to get those services done, and all within like a particular radius, so you know that you don't have to like spend a lot traveling to get that done, and you can just it just adds a bit of reassurance, and also eliminate some of the stress and hassle that might be present in the current model of like digging through stuff to find someone, or trying to like shout into the void to get your skills noticed and your services noticed. So yeah, that was where the whole idea of BRAIDAR came about. So like I was thinking a mixture of braid and radar to kind of communicate that sense of this is something that can help you get braids and help you find people who can do braids. And so yeah, I've just been trying to get a lot of feedback from students and like student stylists and things on what they would need for such a website, for example, to actually facilitate that change and to hopefully improve the experience as well. Because at the end of the day, what I feel is that if we can put in place that infrastructure to facilitate that diversity, then the more people of diverse backgrounds will want to come here, because it's like you see that social proof of students who are already studying here, and that they'll be able to verify that, oh yeah, there's access to student stylists here. Like, yeah, you can totally get braids here. It's easy. It's not too far, not too expensive. So that cumulative effect of social proof and of sort of pouring into that infrastructure, I think will have a positive effect on long-term sort of representation within institutions, because then you're building up that reputation of, oh yeah, this is somewhere where you can feel at home, you are welcomed, and you are able to express this facet of yourself. And yeah, I think that's just sort of the dream, really, to find ways to improve experiences. Yeah, because if someone really wants to go to a university and they love the course and it's been their dream, something like not being able to be yourself there shouldn't be a barrier, or rather, it's a barrier that we should put a lot of effort into removing. And so, yeah, that's just where my passion sort of comes from for this. And hopefully over this podcast series, as we dive into different elements of the beauty of business, we'll be able to touch on more about the Black beauty industry and more about different interesting and innovative ways in which beauty can sort of bridge that gap between groups and that feeling of being seen and that feeling of being heard. So yeah, it should be a very interesting ride, this podcast series. So thank you so much for listening in, and hope to be, just as engaging next week when I come on Saturday at 3 p.m. I hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon, and I will see you then.